In the middle of days that seem completely ordinary, Cancer may suddenly feel something shift inside. Not noise from the outside world, but a quickening of thought, a decision waiting, a conversation that hasn't happened yet, an answer you've been holding back for too long. It can feel like something is gently urging you forward, as if you don't act right now, something important might slip away. And yet, if you sit still for just a few minutes in the quiet of the night, you may begin to notice that the urgency isn't necessarily danger. Sometimes it's simply a wave of emotion rising, asking to be heard. Cancer, you are deeply sensitive to the smallest movements of your own heart. You don't just feel what you think. You feel what hasn't even formed into words yet. And because of that, when everything starts moving quickly, you may believe you have to respond immediately. You have to protect. You have to hold on. You have to say the thing that's been caught in your throat, but maybe hidden inside that rush. There's another kind of silence, a memory, soft as mist, an image from the past, appearing just as you're about to hit send on a message, or just as you're weighing an important choice. It could be the presence of someone who once held your hand when you were small, someone who taught you what gentleness looks like, what strength feels like. Not because they're speaking from somewhere far away, but because remembering them slows you down. Cancer grows through quiet losses. You learned how to hide sadness behind a gentle smile. You learned how to become the safe place for others, sometimes forgetting you needed one too. And because you've been hurt before, you may react quickly when something feels off. You want to fix it immediately, resolve it immediately, put out the fire before it grows. But maturity doesn't always live in instant action. Sometimes it lives in the ability to stay with your emotions without running, without rushing. Picture a quiet evening, soft yellow light filling the room. You sitting there, doing nothing special, just allowing your heart to settle. In that moment, you might realize that what's worrying you isn't only about right now. It touches an old bruise, an old fear formed years ago. And when you can gently separate what belongs to the present from what echoes from the past, everything begins to look clearer. Cancer, you are not lacking intuition. In fact, your intuition usually whispers early. It's just that sometimes that whisper gets drowned out by the fear of losing something you love. If you give yourself even one day, just one pause, you may hear that quiet voice again. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't threaten you. It simply reminds you. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve respect. You deserve to be loved sincerely. There may be a big choice in front of you right now. It could be about love, about work, or about a boundary you're considering setting. No one can declare which road is right. But when you choose from calm instead of panic, the decision carries a different energy. It isn't reaction. It's alignment between your heart and your clarity. Perhaps the memory of someone who once loved you isn't here to push you toward a specific direction. Perhaps it's simply reminding you of the purest version of yourself, the version who knows how to love without abandoning who you are. When you act from that place, every choice becomes part of growth, not a test of fate. The night is still moving forward, and you are still here, breathing a little slower, thinking a little deeper. In this quiet space, you may begin to feel that nothing truly meant, for you will disappear just because you chose to slow down. Then maybe, just maybe, that slowing down opens a new perspective, one where you feel steadier, softer, ready to move forward with a heart that is no longer trembling, as if the story isn't ending at all, but gently continuing, waiting for you to listen to one more beat of your own heart. And then, as your breathing slows just a little, you begin to see the choice in front of you more clearly. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic like something from a movie. But for Cancer, it's subtle enough to make your heart shift. A delicate situation where one sentence could widen the distance or gently close it. A professional decision where you quietly wonder whether the loyalty you've given is truly being returned. Or maybe it's something simpler. A personal boundary you're unsure whether to hold firmly or soften, because you don't want to hurt anyone. Cancer, your heart has always been wide open. When you love something, you protect it with devotion. When someone enters your safe space, you don't love halfway. You invest your emotion, your time, your care, sometimes more than anyone realizes. And so when trust feels fragile, the emotional tide inside you can rise fast. There are moments when you ask yourself, am I listening to my intuition, or am I reacting from an old wound that never fully healed? Because your intuition is subtle, but so is the fear of loss. And sometimes those two feel almost identical. It becomes hard to tell whether the feeling inside you is a gentle inner warning or just an echo from a time you were hurt before. When emotion swells, your instinct is to clarify everything immediately. You want to speak, you want to ask, you want answers. Silence can make you uneasy. But this is where the pause matters most. Not because something terrible is waiting if you act, but because clarity rarely shows up when your heart is racing. Imagine standing at the shoreline late in the afternoon. When the waves are rough, the water turns cloudy. You can't see what lies beneath. But when the tide settles, the surface clears. Light reaches the sand below. Clarity lives in that stillness. Cancer, you are no different. When you give yourself time to settle, you begin to see what's truly bothering you. Maybe it isn't just what someone said. Maybe it's the fear of not being valued, the fear of losing something familiar. A big decision often carries two inner voices. One voice urges you to protect yourself immediately, to build the wall, to pull back before you're hurt. The other voice is softer. It doesn't demand. It simply asks, can you look at this one more time, with calm, with compassion, with understanding? Not to excuse what's wrong, but to make sure you're responding from awareness and not from reflex. In your career, this might look like feeling unseen and wanting to defend your worth. In love, it might feel like a subtle doubt, wondering whether someone is fully honest. In family, it might be the tension between sacrifice and self-care. No matter the setting, the deeper question remains the same. What are you protecting? And are you protecting it from love or from fear? The pause is not weakness. It is maturity. When you slow down, you send yourself a powerful message. My emotions deserve to be understood before they turn into action. You don't have to solve everything tonight. You don't have to respond the moment a message appears. You don't have to commit while your heart is still unsettled. Cancer, your kindness is not fragile, but it needs clarity beneath it. When kindness and clarity stand together, the choice in front of you feels less frightening. It becomes an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply, and when you understand yourself, you move forward differently, calmer, more grounded. As if each layer of emotion is being gently lifted away, revealing a steady center that has always been inside you. Perhaps you are not becoming someone new at all. Perhaps you are simply learning to trust that center again. And when you've sat long enough with your emotions, you may begin to notice something very subtle. That hesitation you feel isn't necessarily fear. It's more like a breeze carrying a familiar scent. Brief, almost invisible, but strong enough to make you pause. It's memory. There may have been someone in your life like that, someone who didn't have to say much, but whose presence alone made you feel steady. It could have been a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, an older friend, or even someone who only walked beside you for a short time, yet left a mark that stayed. They weren't perfect. They had their flaws. But in the way they looked at you, there was a quiet trust, as if they saw something in you that you sometimes forget to see yourself. You don't have to believe they're sending signs from somewhere beyond. You don't have to search for mystical signals. What matters is this. When you think of them, you slow down. It's as if your mind expands into a wider space, and you begin to wonder, if they were sitting across from me right now, what would they say? Would they tell me to act immediately, or would they smile gently and suggest I have a cup of tea first? Would they urge me to defend myself? Or remind me that trust also requires courage? Cancer often carries memories like small stones in a pocket, not to weigh you down, but to remind you where you've once stood. When you think of someone who shaped your sense of safety, you may realize that steadiness doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from knowing your own worth. Maybe they once told you that you were stronger than you believed, or maybe they never said it aloud, but their eyes made you feel it was true. That inner anchor is quiet, but powerful. It helps you distinguish between reaction and choice. When you stand before a decision, their memory becomes like a mirror. reflecting back a wiser version of you. The version who doesn't act from old pain. The version who doesn't speak sharply just to protect herself. That version may still be sensitive, still emotional, but no longer driven blindly by feeling. There are nights when an old sentence returns to you, a simple piece of advice. And in the soft light of that memory, you feel yourself soften too. You no longer want to prove anything, no longer want to win. You simply want to understand what truly matters. Sometimes what matters most is not holding on to a relationship at any cost, but holding on to respect for yourself. Cancer has a rare ability to feel the depth of connection, but because you value connection so deeply, you may fear losing it. When the memory of someone who loved you appears, or it doesn't push you in one fixed direction, it simply reminds you that you were once loved without conditions, seen without judgment, and if that kind of love once existed, you can offer that same gentleness to yourself. You may begin to realize that your hesitation isn't weakness, it's honesty. Honesty about what you feel, honesty about the values that shaped you. When you place your hand over your heart and quietly ask yourself why you're about to act, you're touching the deepest part of who you are, the place where decisions are illuminated by self-respect and compassion. The person who shaped you may no longer be physically present in your daily life, but their influence remains in how you listen, how you love, how you pause before you speak. And when you allow yourself a moment to remember them, you allow your more mature self to step forward. Should the version who understands that not every battle requires participation, not every emotion requires immediate response. In that stillness, you may feel supported from within, not by something mystical, but by the memory of love that was once whole. And from that place, the path ahead becomes clearer, as if thin layers of fog are slowly dissolving, revealing an open sky you can step into with softness and strength. Said and then. Once you've touched that memory, that deeper place where you once felt loved and seen with kindness, you begin to notice another layer of emotion around you. It isn't obvious. It doesn't explode into conflict, but it hums like a soft current in the air, a subtle tension, just enough to make you alert. Maybe it's a misunderstanding that hasn't been named yet, a sentence left unfinished, a look that no longer carries the warmth you're used to. Or maybe you find yourself standing between two energies, where emotion and loyalty feel tangled together. Not necessarily a romantic triangle, but perhaps three perspectives, three people, three directions, forming something fragile, with you at the intersection. Cancer often senses shifts before anyone speaks. Before words are said, you already feel something slightly off. And your first instinct is to protect. Protect the relationship. Protect your dignity. Well, protect your heart from the possibility of being hurt. Sometimes, you're ready to build a wall just because your intuition whispers that something could happen. But not every moment requires immediate defense. Some moments ask for observation. Notice the subtle change in someone's tone. Notice your heartbeat when you read that message. Notice the first thought that rises. And then step back and look at it from a distance, before sending a long explanation, before choosing a side, before making a commitment that may be difficult to undo. Perhaps the kindest thing you can offer yourself is space. Not space as avoidance, but space as listening. Because when emotions are still hot, decisions are easily colored by fear or old pain. And Cancer. With your sensitive heart, you sometimes forget that not every feeling of unease means real danger. Imagine standing by the ocean as the wind begins to rise. You could run inside immediately, or you could remain still for a moment and sense whether this wind is the beginning of a storm or simply a passing gust. The difference lies in giving yourself time to understand what's truly happening. 24 hours may sound small in the span of a lifetime, but in the emotional world, one day can shift perspective completely. When you don't respond right away, you allow yourself to see from multiple angles. You may discover that the information you had was incomplete. You may realize that what upset you was actually an unspoken need. And you may find that your intuition wasn't pushing you to act. It was inviting you to move with caution and gentleness toward yourself. Cancer does not lack courage, but courage is not always immediate action. Sometimes courage is the willingness to sit with uncertainty for a little while, to accept that you don't have to resolve everything tonight, or to trust that if a relationship truly has a solid foundation, it will not collapse simply because you chose silence for one more day. When you create that space, you give yourself a gift, the gift of clarity. You're not denying your emotions. You're not letting them control you either. You're placing them gently in front of you, like setting down a cup of hot tea, waiting for the steam to soften before taking a sip. And in that quiet, you may feel something shift. Not because the issue disappears, but because you didn't let yourself be swept away by the first wave. You paused, you breathed, you observed. And in doing so, you begin to build a new kind of strength. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough to carry you forward without losing who you are. And when you give yourself that space, when you're no longer standing inside the very first wave of emotion, but have stepped back far enough to see the wider ocean, something gentle begins to unfold. The most beautiful part of this moment is not that you avoided a mistake. It's that you are being invited into a more mature version of yourself. No one is threatening you with a dark outcome. No fate is hanging over your head. There is only a quiet opportunity to choose how you respond to life. And within that choice, there is a familiar presence waiting for you to return. It's a version of you from another time, when maybe from childhood, when your heart was open and didn't yet feel the need to defend itself. Maybe from before a relationship taught you to close a little, before you learned to doubt instead of trust. That version of you was not naive, not blind, just steady, in a very natural way. You once knew how to trust your feelings without needing to prove them. You once knew how to love without building endless conditions around it. Where you once walked with calm because you weren't haunted by the fear of losing everything. That calm didn't come from a perfect life. It came from the belief that no matter what happened, you could stay with yourself. Cancer grows through deep emotional lessons. You understand the value of connection, and you understand the pain when connection fractures. Maybe that's why sometimes you confuse caution with closing off. You think if you react faster, defend sooner, you'll be safer. But real safety doesn't come from adding more layers of armor. It comes from standing firmly in your own center. When you reconnect with that steadiness, the decision in front of you feels simpler, not because it's no longer complex, not because emotion disappears, but because you are no longer being carried away by it. You can look at the choice and quietly ask yourself, does this align with my values? Does this reflect the person I want to become? Some inner clarity feels very different from urgency. Urgency speeds up your heart, scrambles your thoughts, pushes you to resolve everything immediately. Clarity is quieter. It's like stepping outside after a rainstorm. The sky may not be fully blue yet, but you know the storm has passed. The air feels cooler. Your vision stretches farther, and you don't need to run anymore. Cancer often seeks safety in relationships, but perhaps this season is asking you to rediscover safety within yourself. When you no longer rely entirely on someone else's reaction to define your worth, you begin to act from a steadier foundation. You can speak what needs to be said without trembling. You can remain silent without feeling abandoned. Emotional maturity does not mean becoming colder. It does not mean feeling less. You are still sensitive, still moved by small details, but you no longer allow every emotion to pull you far from your center. But you learn to sit with a feeling, instead of letting the feeling take the driver's seat. And when you return to that calm place within, you may realize something important. Your choice does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be honest. Honest about what you truly feel, not what you fear might happen. And in that honesty, something lightens. The pressure to react correctly begins to fall away. You may still feel uncertain. You may still wonder if you're missing something. But beneath those questions, a quiet foundation is forming. And when you move from that quiet place, even the smallest step carries a different quality. Not rushed, not forced, just a soft trust that you are walking in rhythm with yourself. And that rhythm is enough to carry you forward into deeper layers of your own unfolding journey. And when you finally reach that place of calm, when your choices are no longer shadowed by old fears, you begin to see the crossroads in front of you in a different light. There is nothing here that is truly irreversible. No door is slamming shut just because you need more time to understand your own heart. What stands before you is simply an intersection. Two roads opening at once. No force, no threat, just possibility. Cancer often feels that every decision touches something very deep inside. But when you pause long enough to truly listen, you may realize this crossroads is not a test of fate. It is an invitation to choose in a more mature way. If you slow down, if you allow that quiet inner voice to rise instead of being drowned out by loud, anxious thoughts. If you move from steadiness instead of reflex, what unfolds next may feel lighter. Lighter does not mean effortless. It doesn't mean there won't be challenges. It may simply mean you no longer feel like you're carrying everything alone. A conversation that once felt heavy can soften when you enter it calmly, not to prove you're right, but to understand and be understood. A professional direction can become clearer when you're no longer deciding out of fear of missing out. And perhaps most importantly, your trust in yourself can begin to renew. Like you may discover that you are capable of guiding yourself through uncertain moments without losing your gentleness. Some memories of those who once loved you are not meant to guide you in some mystical way. They are mirrors. When you remember them, you don't just recall their advice. You remember how you felt around them, trusted, seen, accepted, even in your imperfection. And that feeling has always lived inside you. When you slow down before a major choice, you're not just honoring a memory. When you're honoring your own journey, you're acknowledging that your heart deserves care. You're recognizing that your sensitivity is not a burden. It's a form of wisdom when listened to properly. Cancer does not lack hope. Sometimes hope is simply covered by small worries collected over time. But when you stand at this intersection and choose consciously, hope stops being an abstract idea. It becomes something tangible, the feeling that you are walking with yourself, not running from emotion, so not being ruled by it. And maybe the most beautiful part is not what the outcome will be. It's how you step into it, with calm, with self-respect, with a gentle trust that whatever happens, you can learn, adjust, and continue growing. The night is still here, quiet, open. In that space, you may sense that you are not being pressured to be perfect. You are simply being invited to be more honest with yourself. And when you place your hand over your heart, take one slow breath. You might hear something very soft, very clear. A reminder that the road ahead doesn't need to be brilliantly lit. It only needs enough light for the next step. And that is already enough for you to keep walking.